Hi, I'm Divya and thanks for tuning in today. This was a birthday present for my niece. She was turning 2. She's the most kindest, smartest, sweetest, bravest kid around. And I thought this design, the coat and the box would be perfect for her. I used an MDF box in shape of a book, a Frida inspired napkin. My plan was to have the napkin design at the bottom and write something on the top. For the base coat, I'm using white chalk paint. The other options are white acrylic paint or gesso. Now, one of the first mistakes I made was I gave a very thin, runny, uneven coat of chalk paint. I was going for a very peppy, happy, carefree look, and I thought the uneven brush strokes would add to that look. But later in the project, I realized that that was a mistake. And if I was doing this box again, I would absolutely avoid that and I would give a clean, even coat of base coat. I'm using acrylic gel medium to glue down the napkin. You could use any decoupage glue or Mod Podge. Decoupage napkins are extremely delicate. They tend to tear and wrinkle up and they're very, very unforgiving. So I've discovered the best way to work with them is 1. Apply very little glue, 2. Work in sections, 3. Apply glue first, press down the napkin, give it a couple of minutes, let it dry, and then seal it over with some glue again. Remember to use very little glue and be patient. The reason I didn't stick the napkin at the very bottom of the box was because I loved the design of her shirt, and so I wanted to replicate that. I'm using some acrylic paints in the same shades, that is black, green, a little bit of red, pink and orange, and I'll try and replicate the design as close to it as possible. Another reason why I did this was because I knew I had just a couple of words coming on the top and I didn't want a lot of blank space, so I moved the design up a bit so the box looks fuller. At the back of the box, where I'm using the same design, you'll see that I stuck the design exactly on the edge because there's a lot more text coming there. The coat I went for that best reflected my niece's personality was fearless and invincible. She's truly that. I played around with the font in Illustrator. I did try a couple of sizes and layouts. Once I liked the size and layout, I cut that piece out. And I'm using something called carbon paper. Now I don't know if this is a universal term or this is something that we use here in South India. This is basically a sheet that has some ink on one side of it. You place it underneath your design, and once you go over your design with a pencil or a pen, it leaves a nice clear impression. Now this was my second mistake. Later in the video, you'll see why using a carbon paper was a mistake. I usually draw freehand, but to be honest, sometimes the fonts don't turn out really nice or the layout is not as impressive as I would like it. For me, freehand drawing is a bit of a luck thing. If I'm lucky, it turns out really well, but other times I usually have to erase it down and redo it. Because I was short of time for this project and I didn't want to keep redoing the coat, I decided to use a carbon paper. Now if I were to do this box again, I would still definitely trace, but I would use a different method and I wouldn't use a carbon paper. Once the tracing was done, I filled in the letters with black acrylic paint and let it dry. Some of the edges were not very sharp, so I went over it with a black fine permanent marker. The bottom of the box was looking very colorful, but the top of the box was looking a little plain with just the black and white. So I decided to add some paint splashes. I am taking the colors from the design and adding some diluted paint, paint splashes here and there. I make sure to cover her a little bit because I didn't want the paint splashes on her face. Earlier when I used Scotch tape, it pulled some of that napkin and paint out. I'm using a little bit of sandpaper and sanding the area lightly just so it'll get rid of any unevenness. Once the front side of the box was drying, I glued down the napkin on the back side of the box. Now this is where I regretted using just a thin, even coat of chalk paint. You can clearly see once I glued down the napkin, there was a patch of sorts that just showed up. So you'll see me go over the napkin with some white paint just to cover that area. I picked a nice bright green for the sides and the inside of the box. I had a coat for the backside of the box as well. I did the same exact thing. Once I decided the size I wanted, I cut it out and used a carbon paper to trace it out, and filled in the letters with black acrylic paint. I really loved the dragonfly, the butterfly and the birds of the design, and I wanted to add these elements in the rest of the box as well. At this point, I didn't want to risk sketching and then maybe erasing and redoing it. So I decided to go with the safer bet, which is stamps. I'm using some rubber stamps and I add a couple of stamps here and there. Now these are the kind of details that really make your work stand out. Stamps, adding some stamps, and the color splashes that I added earlier, this kind of brings everything together, makes the whole thing look coherent. Otherwise it looks like you just slapped on some random paper and some random text on there. Adding the colors of the text to the design and adding the colors of the design to the text, and adding some overall these small little details just kind of brings everything together. The final step turned out to be my final mistake. The box was done and all it needed was varnish. Now usually I apply a layer of Mod Podge or gel medium, let it dry and apply a layer of aqua or a top coat varnish. Here I noticed that a little bit of that blue pigment from the carbon paper was smudging, and I thought a brush and Mod Podge might make it runny, and I decided to use a spray varnish. This is a varnish spray for acrylic paints. But you'll see that it absolutely did not help, and it did run that pigment and it looked extremely smudgy. I was heavily pregnant when I was working on this project and I didn't want to inhale those fumes. So I did a little bit of that on camera just to show you what was happening, and I asked my husband to spray the rest of the box. It did look runny. It was not my best output. This box was going all the way to London and I didn't have time for a redo. So this was one of the mistakes. This was one of the things I regret, was spraying. The whole use of cardboard paper you see now is not a very good idea. The spray also kind of brought on that patchy white paint as well. So overall the box didn't turn out to be my best work. My cousin and my niece obviously loved it because they're very sweet and they love me. But if I were to do this box again, these are the things I would take care of and try something else. Ultimately, the box did end up with that carefree, happy vibe I was going for. This is also one of my favorite pieces because I was making it for one of my favorite people in the world, my niece Ira. Her mom, Soumya, my sister, is one of my biggest fans and patrons. Soumya absolutely loves my work. She's so proud of it. She displays them, displays anything I give her in her house. She shows it to all her friends. She always gives me amazing feedback. That kind of love and support means the world to me. I love spoiling these girls with amazing gifts because I get so much joy just watching them enjoy whatever I make for them. A lot of the products that you see on my page or on my YouTube channel is actually gifts that I make for them. Thanks for tuning in, and I will see you next time.